Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about Chad Daybell. Now, Chad Daybell, I've talked about Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow quite a few times at this point. I'll link all the videos down below. I don't even know how many there are because this has been going on since 2019 if I recall correctly. So it's been a while. Anyway, so there's been an update. Chad Daybell sentenced to death for killing wife and girlfriend's 2 children in jury decision. A jury in Idaho unanimously agreed Saturday that convicted killer Chad Daybell deserves the death penalty for the gruesome murders of his wife and his girlfriend's 2 youngest children, ending a grim case that began in 2019 with a search for 2 missing children. 55-year-old Daybell, wearing a dress shirt and tie, sat with his hands in his lap at the defense table. He showed no emotion when learning he would face the death penalty for the murders of Tammy Daybell, 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, and 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow. When asked by the judge whether he wanted to make a statement, Daybell declined. Jurors found him guilty Thursday and decided on the death sentence after deliberating for just over a day. Now, anytime the death penalty comes up, I know that there is usually a heated debate. I don't know where we stand in terms of like whoever is viewing this channel. I don't know if you guys are leaning more in one direction or another. Generally speaking, am I against the death penalty? No, I'm not going to elaborate on that. The mother of the children is Lori Vallow Daybell, whom Chad Daybell married shortly after his wife's death. Vallow was convicted last year in the 3 murders and is now awaiting trial in Arizona, charged with murder in connection with the shooting death of her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. Charles Vallow is JJ's father. Yeah, so a big part of this case that I think most people who followed it tapped into rather immediately is that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell had a lot of death around them. It's basically a consensus that that is not a coincidence. Granted, tragedy can follow certain people, but in some cases it becomes a little bit too suspicious, and in their case, that is exactly what it was. Like I said, it's all in the videos down below because there was footage from storage spaces, if I recall correctly. There was their weird doomsday shit, which in and of itself screamed not necessarily Jonestown, but like a mini version of that. There were a lot of things that were wrong. So while I do believe that some people are unfortunate and tragedy just, you know, follows them to a degree, this is not the case here, in my opinion. The case began in 2019 when a family member called the police. Investigators soon realized both children were missing and a multi-state search ensued. Nearly a year later, their remains were found buried on Chad Daybell's property. Tylee's DNA was later found on a pickaxe and shovel in a shed of the property, and JJ's body was wrapped in trash bags and duct tape, prosecutors said. During a nearly 2-month-long trial, prosecutors said Chad Daybell, a self-published author who wrote doomsday-laced fiction, promoted unusual spiritual beliefs, including apocalyptic prophecies and tales of possession by evil spirits in order to justify the killings. This has been a tough case because of its complexity, both in telling the story of an investigation that spanned years and trying to figure out the best way to present it in a way that would make sense to others, Fremont County Prosecutor Lindsay Blake said outside the Boise courthouse after the sentencing. Yeah, so this article I don't think goes super into detail about the spiritual beliefs, but I think that is one of the most important parts of this case because it basically isn't a direct admission to guilt. But if you're out here saying that you think your children are basically possessed by evil or they have evil residing within them, however you want to put it, if they go missing, you immediately look suspicious because you were the one saying that basically they are to some degree possessed by evil, darkness, whatever you want to call it. That's a significant part also because knowing that that's kind of like a belief set that's there, it could be viewed as what I think is the driving force of the killings, which then could explain how shit happened in the first place. So the question is also, how much are you going to use your spiritual beliefs as a shield in the sense of, do you just want to kill your children and do you want an excuse and spiritual beliefs will do that for you? Does that make sense? So overall, it's a fucking shit show, and I think that that's why people were so confused by it because there were all these extra layers and you couldn't really understand what's a genuine belief, what's bullshit, what's maybe both. Relatives of the victims welcomed the jury's decision. This is the best justice we can possibly get, and again, it doesn't change the outcome, but it is good news and it brings closure for everybody that's been hurt. Colby Ryan, Vallow Daybell's oldest child, told reporters. Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandfather, thanked the judge, law enforcement, and the people who have followed the case and share their support over the years. Your family, he said, I look at the faces and I'm going to tell you all, I'm going to miss you. We saw justice, he added. equal, honest, and righteous. Daybell's defense attorney, John Pryor, argued during the trial that there wasn't enough evidence to tie Daybell to the killings and suggested Vallow Daybell's older brother, Alex Cox, was the culprit. Cox died in late 2019 and was never charged, and Vallow Daybell was convicted last year and sentenced to life in prison without parole. I'm not gonna get into Alex Cox and how Alex Cox died, but if you do want to do some digging, and this is only briefly mentioned in the videos that I referred to prior, that is also suspicious. So when I'm saying that these people are surrounded by death, I'm really not exaggerating, and none of it is very coincidental, because isn't it interesting that they're going to blame someone who happened to have died? Isn't it interesting that the children who happened to have died also were possessed, whatever? During the sentencing hearing, Pryor asked the jurors to judge Daybell on his life before he met Vallow Daybell, describing her as a bomb that blew him off the trajectory of an otherwise wholesome life. But Daybell also declined to offer any mitigating evidence during the sentencing hearing. Mitigating evidence is often used to encourage jurors to have sympathy for a defendant in an effort to show that a life sentence would be more appropriate than capital punishment. I need assistance. So this couple was certain that their children had darkness in them, as far as we know from what's been reported by the media. The children had darkness within them. That was released via texts, I think it was. So children are responsible for the darkness within them, and they're so responsible that you kill them for it. But you, Chad Daybell, marry a woman and she has you so fucked up that she's the one who kind of drags you into this weird, dark belief set that got you to murder your children, most likely. But that's not your responsibility, that's all her fault. So children are going to be taking more responsibility than adults? Because couldn't we say that she had a darkness, the darkness then infiltrated you, and therefore you should also be killed? Because then capital punishment makes sense. Am I missing something? Like, the math is not mathing. Anyway, regardless, I completely believe and understand that being around the wrong people will make you do fucked up shit. That, for me, is not valid for murder, abuse, blah, blah, blah. You can be around bad influences and start smoking or something, but when it comes to abuse, murder, blah, 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 I don't really think anyone should be able to influence you that much where you think it's okay to murder your own kids. Family members of the victims gave emotional statements to the jurors. J.J. Vallow's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, tearfully described how the 7-year-old would show empathy and compassion to others through soft touches and by frequently asking if those around him were okay. She also said Tylee was a doting big sister and that it warmed her heart to see them together. I can't express just how much I wish for more time to create memories, Woodcock said, beginning to weep. Ryan, Vallow Daybell's oldest child, described what it was like to lose his entire family. His father died years earlier. Again, we return to the absolute loss that envelops Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. And I know I've said it before, and I know I'll probably say it like a billion times in this video, but that is such a core part of all of this, in my opinion. And aside from that, it's going to inevitably color public opinion, right? If you have this couple of murderers, in my opinion, and everyone around them just happens to die, how is that going to make you feel about the two murderers? Are you likely to be lenient on them if they're shady and suspicious? Are you likely to see them as victims if they're shady and suspicious? No, and on top of that, because everyone around them seems to have died in some weird circumstance, you're also going to be like, huh, maybe the kids were not the first. My 3 kids will never know the kindness of Tylee's heart or JJ's silly and goofy personality. The only way I could describe the impact of their lives being lost is like a nuclear bomb dropping, he said. It's not an overstatement to say I lost everything. To impose the death penalty, the jurors had to unanimously find Daybell met at least one of the aggravating circumstances that state law says qualifies someone for capital punishment. They also had to agree that those aggravating factors weren't outweighed by any mitigating factors that might have lessened his culpability or justified a lesser sentence. The jury decided there were aggravating factors, including an utter disregard for human life and the murders being especially heinous and cruel. Idaho law allows for execution by lethal injection or firing squad, though firing squad executions have never been used in the state. We're gonna go back to the firing squad part because I did not know that and I have things to say. Okay, so it is very telling that the jurors had to unanimously find that Daybell met at least one of the quote-unquote aggravating circumstances. I'm not surprised that he did meet aggravating circumstances. I'm surprised that everyone agreed, which I think is, again, rather telling. Now, granted, depending on who these jurors are, you might have people who all have a similar mindset, all lean more in one direction than the other, and they might just be naturally more on the same page. However, part of me also thinks, imagine if you have people on opposite ends of political spectrum, religious spectrum, of opposite ends of whatever belief system you can come up with, and they still agree that the death penalty should be on the table. What does that tell you? And again, you guys know, I don't particularly ascribe to the idea that numbers necessarily mean correctness, but a lot of the time, if a lot of people come to the same conclusion, you at least have to ask yourself, why is that? In terms of lethal injection, I did not know that there was also the firing squad option, and I was on TikTok, I was looking at CBS's TikTok, of all the TikToks, CBS, anyway, and I was looking at the comments to see what people were saying, and they were saying that they thought that death by firing squad was a little much. I don't know about that. Personally, I don't know about that. If we're really going to get into the nitty gritty, I guess it depends on how fast shit kicks in. Because honestly, I don't know how fast it takes for like the lethal injection to be lethal, and like even beyond when it seems like you're unconscious. Are you really unconscious? Are you still feeling things? I don't know, and I really don't want to further put myself on some weird ass watch list, so I'm not gonna go into all of that. But I will say that for certain people, the firing squad makes sense to me. But you guys can let me know what you think. I also would wonder in what case they would use the firing squad, because as it said, it's never been used in the state, and I think that that's interesting. Like what case would be the first one? Like what would be the standard to say, okay, this was the first case that used the firing squad, from now on, probably a lot of cases like that will end up with the firing squad. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I can't believe this has been going on for so long. I remember all the updates on this case, and I went silent for a while, understandably, but I can't believe that it's basically been 5 years already that this has been dragging on. I'm just glad there is some sort of conclusion. It's always hard to say justice because, you know, people lost their lives, so I don't really think there's proper atoning for that, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.